So thank you all for coming out tonight. We really appreciate it as the seniors. And we've all worked very hard and put our blood, sweat, and tears, like Mr. Mero said, into it. So we hope you enjoy it. And yeah, without further ado, the title of my thesis is Social Media, Friendly Platform or Fleshly Provision. You have diabetes, the doctor explains to Eric. My orders? Stay away from sugar. Maybe even take a different commute than normal to college, so you won't be tempted to go into any of the stores. Eric nods in agreement, but internally knows he will not be changing his route. It's the fastest way to college, and all of his friends travel that path. He hates being left out. The following morning, Eric walks by the local fudge shop on his way to class. The smells of the fresh fudge are enticing to him, so he stops at the storefront window. Peering inside, he sees an employee handing out free samples. It's only a small amount of sugar, Eric justifies in his mind. A little can't hurt me, right? So, Eric walks into the fudge shop to sample the flavor of the day, caramel turtle, with layers of caramel, pecans, and chocolate. He then decides to buy some. This has to be the most delicious thing I've ever tasted, thinks Eric as he devours the fudge. But this thought is quickly pushed aside by a growing sense of dizziness and tunnel vision as he tumbles to the ground. Just as Eric was told to stay away from sweets, we're told to stay away from sin. Human choice brought sin into the world and corrupted God's beautiful creation. God designed us with a conscience to know right from wrong and created the law to be the standard that his people were to live up to. If the law is not followed, even in the smallest aspect, it is a sin. By nature, we come into this world bound to sin. Not one of us can or wants to follow the law. We were slaves to serve sin. But God demonstrated his own love towards us, in that, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. He died so that we may be set free from a life bound by sin and death, and bridge the gap between us and a holy God. However, our worldly flesh still battles against our regenerated hearts for control. It is this very issue I would like to address today. If I think back to when I first got a phone, there are two things I was sure of. First, I knew I'd have to put a hefty case on it because I'm a walking disaster. And second, I would not be getting social media. I knew too many people who were addicted. Furthermore, I had seen the envy it produced and the self-image problem it gave teens. The first social media platform, 6degrees.com, was invented in 1997 and allowed users to create a profile and post messages on a virtual bulletin board for their friends to see. It wasn't until the mid-2000s, however, that modern social media platforms like Facebook and YouTube emerged. These new platforms have selfish ambitions. These companies use advertisements to gain massive profits at the expense of the user's time, but many still choose to make them a part of their daily lives. Everyone from elementary school students to raging politicians have social media. It's become an inseparable part of society and people's daily lives. Around 60% of the world's population has social media. That's a whopping 4.76 billion people. The average user accesses their platform for around 2.5 hours a day, amounting to a lifetime total of 6 years and 8 months. That's 12.4% of an average person's daily life. As for Generation Z, more than half that generation spends over 4 hours daily on their socials. That totals 9 years, or 19% of their waking life. But what is social media exactly? Social media is an online platform that allows people to communicate and share information in real time. These platforms include Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and the list goes on. They allow the user to accomplish things such as friending, posting, subscribing, scrolling, commenting, hearting, liking, and all of the normal day-to-day ings. But why does this issue of social media matter so much? To explain that, we need to look to Romans 13. After proclaiming that Christian salvation is nearer than when we first believed, Paul commands us to put on the Lord Jesus Christ and to make no provision for the flesh to fulfill its lusts. What counts as making provision for the flesh? If one makes provision for the flesh, they give their fleshly desires the means to sin. They are allowing themselves to be tempted into sin because they keep the enticing temptation within arm's reach. Social media is one such temptation. In fact, social media platforms are designed to lead the user into many forms of sin. The solution to this issue is to pluck social media out of our lives and cast it from us, like Jesus ordered his disciples to do with anything that caused them to sin. Christians should not have personal social media accounts because social media is built to make provision for the flesh. It does so by inducing idolatry, promoting envy, and twisting users' self-image and definition of beauty. Social media is fundamentally designed to make itself an idol in the user's life. It exploits one's psychological need for social connection, validation, and information, while manipulating them to generate profit, addiction, and idolatry. American poet Mary Oliver once said, "Attention is the beginning of devotion." In essence, what we place our attention on is what we devote and pledge ourselves to, making it the defining aspect of our lives. Think about the average person and the 12.4% of their waking life that is claimed by social media. What could you do with an extra 6 years and 8 months? More importantly, what makes social media so addictive that some of us give it this amount of time and attention? Social media's addictive nature comes down to the architecture and design of the platform. The average user does not realize that thousands of specialized software engineers develop their platforms to be as attention-stealing as possible. As Adam Alter describes in his book, Irresistible, what makes platforms like Facebook and Instagram so addictive is that every comment, every activity you post either does or doesn't attract likes, regrams, and comments. If one photo turns out to be a dud, there's always next time. It's endlessly renewable because it's as unpredictable as people's lives are themselves. What Adam is referring to here is how social media retrains the user's brain on a deep level with something called positive intermittent reinforcement. It's the same feeling that people get when gambling, but instead of playing for money, you're pulling the lever on the slot machine for social validation and a dopamine spike. The very design of the pull to refresh on many platforms mimics the exact mechanics of a slot machine. Furthermore, the unpredictability of the next social media notification causes one to subconsciously desire to check their phone for that next jackpot. These social media companies desire our attention because every platform's main source of income is derived from advertising exposure. So, the primary goal of the companies is to get you to spend as much time as possible on their platforms. And as long as huge companies such as Google and Facebook profit from the deal, there will be no changes to the addicting nature of social media. The fact of the matter is social media is not a tool because it desires to capture our time, attention, and devotion. Social media wants us to serve it. We become like what we worship, so nothing should be worshipped over the Lord. As it is explained in 2 Kings when describing the Israelites, they worshipped worthless idols, so they became worthless themselves. We cannot expect to grow more into the likeness of Christ if we are devoting our attention and devotion to these platforms. They are deceptive, manipulative, and selfishly driven. Social media fosters an environment of envy and covetousness as well, creating a space that should be avoided. We live in a culture that encourages envy, materialism, and selfishness, where it seems people are never satisfied with what they have. A recent study points this out by showing that only 14% of American adults would call themselves very happy or content. That means that the rest of the population is living less than satisfied lives. Where is all this dissatisfaction coming from? One of the main causes of dissatisfaction is comparison, something we all do subconsciously. You've probably heard the old saying, comparison is the thief of joy. When it comes to images on social media of people's picture-perfect vacations, their new outfits, shiny shoes, amazing meals, or whatever else is posted, it's tough not to covet that which you do not have. On social media, the pleasant and pleasing are shown, while the uncomfortable and ugly are hidden. As a result, people end up comparing the low points of their day-to-day lives with others' highlighted high points. It steals joy right out from under a person and leaves them feeling empty and unsatisfied. It's a game that's next to impossible to win. But not only can social media cause envy, but it can also demolish users' self-worth and twist their definition of beauty into something unattainable. As a result, the user can begin to despise the image bearer God created them to be, thus insulting him. Nothing is more tangible to prove a mass decline of self-worth than this. The number of high school girls that have seriously considered attempting suicide has alarmingly increased to every 1 in 3. The main progressor of this evident self-worth pandemic is social media, particularly TikTok, Instagram, and Snapchat, where unattainable levels of physical beauty are flaunted as standard. Young women in their teens and early adulthood are the main victims of this toxic beauty culture. This beauty culture is pushed by the social media influencers and models that teenagers frequently follow, yet their beauty is no more than surface level. These influencers have been known to heavily alter their appearance with makeup and cosmetic editing software. When young men and young women view these standards of beauty as normal, depression sets in. No one can live up to this standard. Some of the virtual filters used on these platforms can cause self-image issues as well. These virtual cosmetic filters morph users' faces into beautified images of themselves, manipulating different aspects of the face such as skin tone, eye shape, lip, and nose size. They look so realistic and picture perfect that some users struggle after taking off the filter. This is such a common image problem that some psychologists have dubbed it Snapchat dysmorphia. Self-image conditions such as these can lead to eating disorders, depression, and a host of other issues. More dangerously, the beauty trap of social media causes young men and women to despise their bodies and devalue themselves. These beliefs insult our Creator because we are image bearers of his intricate handiwork. King David described it best in Psalms when he proclaimed, "You formed my inward parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made." Indeed, each of us is fearfully and wonderfully made and graciously loved. If one hates the way they were created or finds no worth in themselves, they're ultimately disrespecting and insulting their Creator. To make things clear, I'm not saying that there's no good in social media at all. Good can come from social media. It allows people to get information very quickly. It can be used to promote good causes. The point of this thesis is not that social media is wholly evil or sinful to use. The point is that as it sits right now, using social media is making provision for the flesh. This is because of the way it has been designed and the way people are using it. Another counter-argument that can be posed to my thesis is that social media should be used by Christians so that it can be turned into something that is not flesh-centered. This is a great point and makes sense, except from what I can deduce, Christians are not changing social media into something less worldly. If they were, we would be seeing massive changes in how people interact on the platforms, including less envy-inducing posts and more people loving their enemies. If anything, social media is changing some of us in the way we act as Christians. Not only is it making provision to the flesh in ways that fly underneath our radar, but it's also built to cause division between us and those we are called to love and share the gospel. There are countless instances where Christians on social media are engaged in heated online screaming matches against a person with opposite political ideology rather than loving them and showing them the truth. This is not by accident. The algorithms that work on these platforms are fundamentally designed to sow division. Division equals more usage time, and more usage time equals more ad time. When it comes down to it, social media desires to discredit and destroy our blameless witness as Christians to those who need to hear it the most. Going back to our friend Eric, he wakes up days later in a hospital room, grateful to be alive and thoroughly convinced sugar is deadly to him. He finally decides to take the doctor's advice and walk in the path less traveled that goes around him. Like Eric, the best way to avoid sin is to avoid temptation. That's why I would urge you to deeply consider how social media is affecting you. In summary, social media makes provision for the flesh by making itself an idol, causing envy and division in the hearts of its users, and distorting a user's image of beauty. If you see any evidence of these things happening in your life, I would urge you to consider deleting your accounts, or at least try to live without them for a period. If you do, you may find that you feel more truly connected to your fellow man and to your Heavenly Father and Creator. Thank you.